Watching dancers perform on an opening night of a production always feels like a distillation of freedom and creativity. We know that it's months of discipline and practice that created these moments of abandon, but nevertheless, the physical expression feels as close to flying as any human might reach. I was reflecting on this balance of graft and inspiration when I met Serge Laurent, director of Cleef Arpels Reflections Dance Festival, which begins next month. We all need a burst of unbridled beauty to nudge us out of winter torpor and into the spring light of March, and this programme will certainly be mine. It's a balance of classical prowess and abstract ideas that explore the emotion and meaning of human movement. Creativity is a theme we'll lean into this month on the show. We'll bring you tales from our sun-kissed travels, musings on the history of tarot, and delve into Lebanese embroidery, which bursts forth with spring flowers. This is Confect Corner, and I'm your host, Sophie Grove.
Through the festival coming to London, what I want to do is to witness how contemporary dance is diverse, how contemporary dance, like contemporary art in general, give us, a vision of the world.
It's tough because you come back and you say, let's make pretty things, but we've witnessed ugly. But then we learn that we can heal our souls by creating beauty and talking about what happened, but in our own way.
I wanted that first show to make a splash. I wanted it to be something that people would come to. I knew that tarot would be popular. I don't think I quite realized how popular it would be. It's really been as close to viral as the Warburg Institute is ever going to get.
Welcome to Confect Corner. I'm your host, Sophie Grove, here in London. And I'm joined, as ever, by Gillian Tobias here in the studio and by our style director, Marcella Palek, in Zurich. Hello to you both.
Lovely to see you in studio and to hear you, Marcella, in Zurich.
Yeah, hello, Sophie. Hello, Gillian, from sunny Zurich.
Well, as listeners will know, we like to start the show with a little show and tell. Gillian, let's begin with you this month. What do you have for us?
Well, I'm kind of on a mission to kind of break up my weeks and my days by just searching out beauty. And I made a point of going to the Great Moguls exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum, one of my favourite museums anyway. But this is really all about craftsmanship, artisans and opulence. And I thought, all right, this is the one for me. It focuses on this 100-year period of these Moguls from the 1560s to the 1600s, where they set up imperial workshops and they drew in the craftsmen from Persia, from all around, the best craftsmen in the world. And they really were patrons of the arts in that way. And this exhibition is just small, but just the choice is exceptional of books, manuscripts, calligraphy, textiles, gems, jewels. Not too big, beautifully lit. So you can really luxuriate in watching and looking at these pieces that are truly, truly exquisite. And I had a few favourites there that I just hovered across, and it just again instilled in me just the importance of filling your life with beauty every day when you can.
And maybe a trip to India.
I came out of the museum and I was thinking to Delhi, Mumbai, Rajasthan. I have to go. I have to return.
Jaipur. I think, we all need a trip to Jaipur having seen that exhibition. I've had a look at the catalogue and it's an incredible, beautiful, rich and amazing language, and the architecture is also remarkable.
And the colours and just, if you think so long ago, the skills and the precision, it's just quite awe-inspiring and stunning. Can't recommend it more. But also you can find these in auction houses, previews, in exhibitions around the world. So it's something you really can search out in your daily life.
Find pieces or...
to look and see them and to really, discover them. And
paintings or...
everything from pieces of jewellery to there's specialist rooms in different museums around the world that you can search these pieces out.
Marcella, tell us about your recent forays and discoveries.
So I have something quite basic, and it's actually not that far. Like India, it's 500 meters from my house. It's a cafe. I discovered it on a Sunday stroll. It's a true hidden gem in an absolutely unexpected place. The small café La Lere is located on Zurlindenstraße in Zurich, Wiedikon. There's not much else on this not really beautiful street, but La Lere is furnished entirely with beautiful warm wood and amazing Japanese paper lightings. The home-roasted coffee, the black sesame latte and the small in-house made chocopan breads are just delicious. I think it's a great contribution to the neighborhood and absolutely worth a bike ride from the city center. So when you're next time here, you have to join me.
I'd love to. And is it new or is it your new discovery?
Yeah, it's open since I think last summer. But as I said, this street, you never go to this street because it's really like there is nothing, you know. So I think it's really a great contribution, and I'm sure other shops or something will follow. This is usually the case when somebody makes a first step.
Wow, and you're in your own ambient coffee shop.
Yes.
In the Zurich bureau.
Yeah. And Sophie, what have you come across that you'd like to share?
Well, I've just been to Palma in Mallorca for a reporting trip, and I was strolling around the old town, and I came across this button shop, well, a haberdashery really, but it's called Angela, and it's been there since 1685. So it's hundreds and hundreds of years old, and you go inside, you can't kind of just browse and pick up things. There's a proper counter with glass and and the owner's there. He's been there for decades. You have to point out which buttons that you would like to peruse. Then he takes them down, and then you look at them and decide. So it's really quite challenging with my limited Spanish to get hold of the buttons I actually wanted, because you couldn't really point. But actually, it was just such a beautiful sense of history, because some of the buttons that were in there were absolutely amazing. Mother of pearl, horn buttons that are really quite impossible to find these days. A real back catalogue of amazing pieces, very intricate wooden buttons. So I really went to town with my button purchasing, and now I'm going to have to get sewing and replacing some of the pieces I have with new buttons.
But the amazing thing is I find sometimes, when you go to like car boot sales or jumble sales, and you pick up pieces of clothes, and the item itself is nothing, but they have these incredible buttons, and I've been known to buy these pieces I know I'll never wear, but I take the buttons off and then sew them onto a simple shirt, and it just transforms the shirt or the jacket. So I'm always on the hunt for sort of old clothes with great buttons.
Marcella, I know you're a bit of a button fan, but you need to go to this place. I mean, not just because Palma at this time of year is unbelievably beautiful. I swam in the sea. I went out and had this absolutely wonderful afternoon, just having a lovely sort of seafood meal in the sunshine on a terrace, and it was, the sea isn't even that cold at this time of year. It's like 15 degrees. So I felt so revitalised, because London has been fairly sort of
bitter,
gloomy of late. I felt very revitalised, and now my wardrobe is going to be a 2.
I can't compete with this Angela store, but maybe I take you with me to the Keck store in Zurich. This is also an old one, although not that old, a button store, and you can spend there also hours. As a student, I replaced often buttons from like old jackets, and they looked like a, Chanel tweed jacket or whatever. It was a miracle. It was unbelievable. So there's a little sister in Zurich, and when you come by, I will show you Keck.
Great.
Well, talking of Chanel, I was lucky enough to be able to film behind closed doors, and I was able to film where they do all the alterations, and towards the end they just happened to open up this cupboard, and there, opening up the cupboard, was all the old buttons Mademoiselle Chanel had ever worked with, and they were all categorized with dates and collections and years, like going back to when she was doing her own couture, and it just took my breath away, and that's something that will linger with me forever. It was just such a privilege.
Oh wow, what a moment. This is a time of year ripe for cultural nourishment, and one event that should be on everyone's diary is the Dance Reflections Festival by French jewellery powerhouse Cleef Arpels.
Taking place across 4 key venues in London, the Royal Ballet Covent Garden, the Tate Modern, the South Bank Centre and Sadler's Wells, the event highlights the brand's legacy of dance and commitment to the choreographic arts.
I wanted to get a sneak peek, so earlier I caught up with Serge Laurent, Van Cleef Arpels Director of Dance and Culture Programmes. Let's have a listen.
We have 2 ways of approaching, this initiative, let's say. The first one, is to support dance companies to create new works and to support also dance institutions like the Royal Ballet and Opera to present the works, because we feel essential, before thinking about to create an event, a festival, it's very important, to support artists and institutions. The second thing, as you know, it's the festival. And the festival, for me, it's like the showcase of the program, a way to celebrate this, our commitment to the field of dance with our partners. It's very important for me to place the festival within the context of a collaboration with partners, colleagues, I would even say, to support what has a strong meaning for us, creation connected to diverse audiences in different cities of the world.
And it's an amazingly international, as you say, program. We have the Ballet de Marseille, but also companies in South Africa. There's an incredible initiative happening in Taiwan. But you're also sort of shifting in the sense of what dance really means in the context of a city like London. You're in the Tate Modern, for instance, dancing, and this is about transmission in a sense. It's about recontextualizing what dance really means. Tell us a bit about that. How are you working with all these different international bodies, but also bringing them to London in new places? It's about education in a sense.
Yeah, in fact, as a curator, I have the chance, to have a strong connection with many other curators in many different countries. I realize, through these contacts, that contemporary dance, what does mean contemporary dance, in fact? It's full of diversity, full of different cultures. So it doesn't mean anything except the fact to approach an art discipline. And through the festival coming to London, what I want to do is to witness about that. How contemporary dance is diverse. How contemporary dance, like contemporary art in general, give us, a vision of the world that is so rich and large, And I hope through these encounters, of inside the festival, we opened, the eyes of people on the rest of the world. In fact, I think as a spectator, as a person part of the audience, and I'm part of the audience, to receive all these things, is a way for me to enlarge my vision of the world, And I think that especially at the times we are living now, to share with other people, this type of experiences. What a breath, Suddenly, you can look something, sometimes languages, you don't properly understand, but you get something from that. And we are all together, and everyone can have his own opinion about it, and it's okay.
And you've just been speaking about the 3 objectives, the 3 pillars, creation, transmission and education. Tell me a bit about the third, in the sense that part of this program is truly engaging with schools, with interventions. Is that important to your vision, in a sense, to kind of bring this, leave a legacy for this festival?
In fact, as a curator dealing with contemporary art in general, I understood that sometimes it's difficult for a general audience to approach contemporary art. And I wondered a lot about this issue. And suddenly, I said to myself, in fact, it's normal. It's normal. You know, as I said, you know, artists are researchers, you know, they are inventing new languages. So it's normal, you know, people could be a little bit, you know, lost in that journey, let's say. It's like traveling abroad, in fact. You don't know exactly what you will encounter, but if you are not open to discovery, to the feeling of not managing everything, you know, of course it's a problem. But if you are open to an experience, you know, you can receive a lot. And what is important with a festival, you know, is not to tell people, this is what is art, this is what is dance, you know. I just invite you to live an experience. And after, the rest belongs to you. You see what I mean? And it's really what, as a curator now, you know, I want to say to everybody, I'm just a mediator, in fact. A person in between the artist and the necessity for the artist to communicate with the rest of the world. And they need people like me, like institutions, you know, to set the meeting, let's say. I don't know how to say that, but it's very important for me, you know, to be conscious of what is my duty in that context. Now it's very clear. I'm the person with my partners responsible to organize the encounter between creation and audiences. And after, why transmission? Just because if you present, you know, new approaches, new vocabularies, you know, it's normal the audience can be a bit surprised, let's say. Just when you discover a new language, when you travel, the sound of the words, you know, are so different. You don't understand. So you are surprised about that. You wonder about the meaning, blah, 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 blah. But if you explain people that before these contemporary artists, there was previous experiences like this, you make people understand maybe better that art is in movement. Art evolves, you know, through the age, and the artists, they are always ahead from their time. So let's say that when you discover a contemporary art piece, whatever, visual, music, and dance, of course, just think about the future. You see what I mean? For example, when Nijinsky, you know, in 1912, presented for the first time in Paris The Rite of Spring, it was a scandal. People left the theater, and now, you know, it's a masterpiece. So trust the artist, you know. When you discover a piece, accept the experience, make your own judgment, you know, but think about what will happen next.
It's interesting you just spoke about this, but the idea that the program contains some, you know, classic pieces from Balanchine and then Merce Cunningham, but then also very new artists and new curators, new choreography. I wonder whether you think this is partly about breaking down some of the barriers and categories that we have, you know, placed upon the idea of ballet, the idea of dance, and creating a kind of less hierarchical sort of canon, in a sense.
Yeah, because, you know, in fact, we're talking about dance. We're talking about how dance, you know, is still in movement, you know. And for me, you know, if you look well, you know, Georges Balanchine, you know, when he created Jules, you know, in 1967, he was contemporary. And now, you know, after all these years, you know, is part of the repertoire and the history. And after, you know, when Pina Bausch started to present her work, you know, in the 80s, you know, she was contemporary, and now she's part of the history of contemporary dance, you know. And it's the same for Anne-Theresa de Kersmaker. And I think that now, you know, for example, in the festival, we have two young choreographers. It's their first piece. You know, they are from this famous dance school in Belgium, PART. It's the school of Anne-Theresa de Kersmaker. And for me, it's so interesting, you know, to present these young choreographers in the context you present also big artists like Trisha Brown, Merce Cunningham, and Georges Balanchine, It's dance, and let's say, for me, I'm a curator. As a curator, I was trained to learn about art history. And for me, contemporary dance makes sense because it's the result of a history. Contemporary dance, contemporary art, it's not something, coming like this, coming from nowhere. It's just the result of something. And I like to tell people about this, and I'm sure it's the best way also for them, for a general audience, to understand more, let's say, the complexity, but also the beauty of creation.
Because there's a story there, you mentioned Balanchine, but I wanted to quickly ask you, finally, what is the reason for Van Cleef's kind of commitment to dance? You just mentioned that there is a kind of sense that you're giving back as a house, as a maison. But could you tell me, what the story is there and the roots of the maison, but also the kind of great commitment and investment that this project really means to the house?
I see. In fact, as usual, it's a matter of people, In fact, the family Van Cleef and Arpels, when they moved to Paris, at the end of the 19th century, and they opened this store, the very early 20th century in Paris, I think it was in 1906. These people, they were living in Paris, and at that time Paris was, let's say, the capital of the arts, Art Deco, everything was blooming in Paris, so they were influenced, by the context, the artistic context. They were fine jewelers, but it's creation, and they were attracted by some sources of inspiration, and among them there was dance. They loved dance, they loved movement and dance. So finally, they decided in the 40s to create brooches, it's ballerinas. And still now, they are creating these objects, let's say. And after, in the 60s, one member of the family met with Georges Balanchine in New York. And what is really interesting is that the famous choreographer, was so fascinated by the creation of the maison, he decided to create a piece inspired by the maison. And I love this story because at the beginning the maison was inspired by dance, and this time the story is reversed, and it's the choreographer who's influenced by the maison, And since then, after that, the ballet became very famous. It was performed, and it's still performed in many, many places in the world. And each time the work was presented, the story was told, Finally, the maison, thought that it was very important to give to the field of dance, because of this connection. And we are in 2000, and we decided to sponsor, to support dance companies and institutions. Just this. And after a while, the president of Van Cleef & Arpels came to me and he said, we are supporting few initiatives, around dance, but we really want to share with audiences, our vision on dance. So for that, we need a curator. We need someone taking care of, let's say, the sponsorship. But along with the sponsorship, we want also to have a vision. So now, let's say I'm a house curator, dealing, of course, with money issues because we sponsor dance companies, as I told you, and institutions, but not like this. With what we just said, with a vision on dance. So we combine both things, and it's so important for us that for this edition of the festival, we are working on a book telling about the full story between the maison and dance. So it's really an historic overview on this, and I proposed to insert in that story 15 interviews of the artists we are supporting now to have their opinion about what is dance for them and what they want to achieve through this creative approach.
Serge Laurent there speaking to me a little earlier. Dance Reflections by Van Cleef Arpels will take place in London from the 12th of March to the 8th of April. This is Confect Corner. Now, most of us have encountered the strange deck of cards known as tarot at one point or another. But where did these mysterious images and symbols come from, and what resonance do they hold today?
Tarot Origins and Afterlives is the first international exhibition to be held at London's Warburg Institute and takes visitors on a journey with the cards through time, space and memory. For this month's episode, our contributor Sarah Grice delved deeper into the arcane world of tarot.
In the heart of Bloomsbury, just off Leafy Gordon Square, sits the Warburg Institute, a leading centre for art and cultural research, and home to one of the world's most curious libraries. In October 2024, the Warburg unveiled its new exhibition space, the Kithera Gallery, a project which has been about 7 years in the making. Now that gallery is hosting its inaugural exhibition, all about tarot. To mark the launch of this intriguing show, I caught up with Bill Sherman, director of the Warburg Institute and co-curator of the exhibition.
I wanted that first show to make a splash. I wanted it to be something that people would come to. I knew that tarot would be popular. I don't think I quite realized how popular it would be. It's really been as close to viral as the Warburg Institute is ever going to get. I mean, we've had to turn people away. It's extraordinary. The other reason is that I wanted the first show to be something that was really true to the Institute's research agenda, training, and history. And it really is. Tarot is one of those subjects where you can show to a new audience what our founder, A.B. Warburg, was interested in, which was really the way in which symbolic images move through time and space. There's almost no better example than tarot because you have this very specific image set or symbol set which structures a card game first, then a divination deck, now a much more playful range of images for 600 years. It's the same things. It's the Wheel of Fortune, it's the Hierophant, it's the juggler or the magician. Sometimes the names change a little bit, but for 600 years we've had the same 22 images making tarot. And that is quite extraordinary. Outside something like the Bible, I can't really think of another symbol set that has stayed so consistent for so long and yet at the same time changed so radically in its look and in its context.
The exhibition leads visitors through key critical moments in tarot's fluid migratory history, beginning with fragments and artifacts from the earliest card decks of the Italian Renaissance, to the Marseille tarot so beloved by French occultists, and the widely recognizable Rider-Waite-Smith deck that emerged in the 1920s during the British occult revival. But the true jewel of this show is a set of extraordinary paintings, replete with alchemical and astrological symbolism, projected geometry, and sumptuous colors.
That is the paintings for the famous Thoth Tarot that Aleister Crowley wanted to have for decades. He painted himself a couple of the cards. They're not very good. They're not very interesting. But he had the good luck to meet a kind of acolyte named Lady Freda Harris. Lady Freda Harris is not the best known British artist, but my God, she's good. And those cards in their proper painting size, which are about A3, they're really big, are unbelievably powerful. And those have been in the Warburg Institute's collection since the late 1960s and have never been shown at the Warburg or anywhere else in the UK. And I knew people would want to see them. They're really powerful and really, really interesting.
Moving forwards in time, tarot is being rearticulated by contemporary artists and activists. used as a tool to address pressing political, social and ecological issues, and to envision alternative futures. British visual artist Suzanne Triester's new tarot deck, Hexen 5.0, is an update of her previous groundbreaking artwork, the Hexen 2.0 deck. Shown together, Triester's tarot decks radically expand not only the visual language but the world-building potential held by the cards.
It's really a history of how we got to where we got as a people and as a nation or as a culture. And I think it's a very, very surprising use of archetypal arcana structure, because it's really much more about contemporary society and the kind of hidden forces and hidden histories that lead us to where we are now. The new deck is only 14 years later, I guess, and it's so interesting to see how the focuses have changed. The previous focus really on, I guess, what used to be called the military-industrial complex, a lot on, interface between early computation and governmental systems, governmental agencies in that first set, almost all replaced by both a focus on climate and earth, and I would say on what one of the cards talks about as post-truth.
The final room features 10 contemporary decks that reveal the cards at work in the world today, affirming that tarot is not just the province of fortune tellers or a wicked pack of cards.
And I think that tarot camera is partly chosen to show examples of something that you might not imagine, which is social uses of tarot. So not about one person's fate being revealed by another person, but a kind of platform for collective projection, even collective negotiation.
But what is driving this return to alternative modes of thinking that run counter to traditional forms of knowledge and the rationalist or scientific understanding of the world inherited from the Enlightenment? Is the wheel of fortune turning full circle in a return to a Renaissance-inflected and magical way of thinking and being?
So the great motto of Erasmus, the so-called Prince of Humanists in the early modern period, is serio ludens, playing seriously. And that idea is so fundamental to Renaissance culture, and I think it's come back. So it's not just the resurgence of an occult form or the resurgence of a specific form, tarot. It's also the resurgence of play that matters. There were all kinds of fallings away of certainties, of the things that gave people a framework of control in their lives. And I think it's safe to say that over these last years, we're finding the same feeling. And I think that people are absolutely turning to alternatives to government, from organized religion, even science, and finding that they're just not giving us what we need in terms of how we navigate our place in the world. And I think that's what is probably driving, above all, the return to interest in alternative spirituality and even the study and practice of magic proper.
So far, the show has drawn a much younger and more socially and economically diverse audience than would ordinarily be seen at the Warburg Institute, which is testament to the powerful, wide-reaching draw of the tarot. But what is it about these cards that makes them so relatable?
There are very few forms in culture that we can own, handle, and use ourselves. And I think the fact that they are portable and affordable means we can take our fate or our place in the world into our own hands, literally. And I think that is one of the reasons why people are drawn to this as a form. It's a very accessible form, a very portable form, but no less powerful than, let's say, a painting on a wall. And, very few of us will ever own a great Renaissance painting. I certainly don't. But I own at least 5 or 6 decks of tarot, and I use them regularly. Sometimes it's just for meditation. Sometimes it's even just aesthetic. I think they're really beautiful. And there's something really powerful and healing just about that, about just looking at the images for their aesthetic power, their design beauty, their utility, but in the form of small rectangular bounded images. And I think that's just not something that most of us have access to in our lives. And I really think tarot is giving that to people.
A report there by Sarah Grice, Tarot, Origins and Afterlives, runs at London's Warburg Institute until the end of April. Marcella, have you ever had your cards read to you?
I'm smiling. Sorry, Sophie, I never had the opportunity. But I once had my hand read. So I don't know if this is similar, but it reminds me. This was quite impressive and a bit scary at the same time. But actually, I quickly forgot about it. What stayed in my mind is that the palm reader was a woman that looked completely normal and not mysterious at all.
No turban then? No, like amazing kind of like robe.
No earrings, no makeup, just like a woman like us.
I couldn't do it. I just don't want to know. And, it's just too much. I think they realize that we just want to hear good things about love and romance and opportunity and travels. And, if it's not that, then it's going to be doom and gloom and death. So, I don't believe the former and I'd be fearful of the latter. So I think I would really avoid it. But what I do like is when you go to antique shops or bracante and you find an old deck of cards and you look at them, and the illustration work can sometimes be absolutely stunning, really almost worth framing, really quite beautiful. What about you, Sophie?
I have had my cards read by somebody I don't think was particularly qualified and seemed fairly unhappy herself. But at the same time, I think it's really interesting that people are reading their own cards. I think there's a sort of psychology and sort of therapy in that's quite intriguing. Not that I have done it myself. But I think also that imagery looks very sinister and to me is kind of worrying, the kind of hangman and different things. But I think when you learn the symbolism of it, it's not so literal. So I think image is very interesting and I think the history is probably worth exploring so that you really understand some of what the kind of icons are.
I guess it's a bit like a Rorschach test, though. You can look at an ink spot and interpret it in any which way, depending on what you want to see.
The tea leaves, and my grandmother used to read people's hands. And she'd always find wonderful stories and wonderful futures for people. And I think that there's a lot of optimism and kind of intrigue in that. And I think it is kind of therapy.
It's almost, if you say it, it will happen.
And finally, today we're in London's Notting Hill to pay a visit to the duo behind Bokja. The Beirut Design Collective has taken up a pop-up space in the legendary Ledbury Road, where they've carved out a world of textile-rich storytelling.
Founded by friends Huda Baroudi and Maria Hibri in 2000, the Lebanese design studio is best known for its exuberant upholstery, patchwork artistry, and commitment to craft traditions that span generations, culture, and the artisans who bring it to life.
Confex Luxury Markets editor Brenda Tui sat down with the duo to unravel the inspirations behind their maximalist aesthetic. She started by asking them what the name Bokja represents.
Bokja actually refers to as simple as a square piece of fabric that is always embroidered, sometimes in gold thread and sometimes in a cotton thread, depending on what background the family is coming from. It can be velvet, it can be cotton, it can be silk, but then it serves a huge purpose. It serves to act as a wrapping, as a bundle. It forms a bundle where women's rites of passage are all put in there. So for birth, They put all the things needed for the baby in this bundle and getting ready for the baby to come. For a marriage, they prepare the dowry and they put this expensive jewelry in this bundle. And then, of course, you have the time to go to the afterlife. So they put their most precious possessions to go with them for the afterlife. And it's a tradition that kept on going. I mean, many other civilizations did it. However, it stayed happening in the 20th century till really the late 50s, after which those beautiful square pieces of fabric became more like heirlooms to be passed from one generation to the other. And that's what we first came across with while we were hunting obsessively for collection of ancient textiles. They come across and they're so visually beautiful to the extent that, and they were easy because they're square. You don't need to cut and harm anything. You just mount them and there you have it, a Bokja piece.
Very cool, indeed. Indeed that is. You set up Bokja in 2000. How would you describe your design philosophy and your friendship?
Our design philosophy is, it's a big word, philosophy, but I think I want to say our values. We have a set of values that are inherent to the brand, and they are very much the guidelines to things. So there is the craft part that we like to preserve, to like to support, and we like to expand. And then there is the fact that Bokja is an engaged brand. So we are very tuned to what's happening around us, and we'd like to shed light on them or discuss them or advocate for them. So, and being in Lebanon is a place where there is a lot to advocate for. So Bokja is a voice, and a voice that we'd like to feel that is honest, and it's also a vehicle for a message. And also we like to have fun. So there is the irreverent part. There is the part where we put things that are not supposed to be together, and then there is harmony, or we can play with colors, we can play with patterns, we can dare things. And maybe this is the base of our friendship, all these components where we feel aligned upon.
I mean, there's an incredible abundance of the most exquisite embroidery here in your cushions, in your pieces of furniture. The cushions we're going to feature in Confect. I can't wait to see them in print. How did you tap into embroidery? Is that something that came from your past? Do you embroider?
Actually, we're women who grew up in Beirut, and it's a natural given. I mean, we're surrounded by our parents who always did cross-stitch. It's a very Levantine tradition. And we always had those cushions, all the embroideries made into cushions thrown into our living rooms. And then Bokjas, they were always part of a trousseau. I would see it coming out of a drawer in this house or that house. But we were passive recipients of all this beauty. It was only when we made this trip to Central Asia, actually, that we were mesmerized, and we came face to face with those embroideries that left us really speechless. We came face to face with the deep colors, with the big motifs, with the tribal storytelling, the unexpected juxtapositions of things. So you'd have the embroideries that they make by hand. They make them as part of a dowry to be given to a bride. And you have the woman of the whole family working on panels before putting it together. And it's their sole decorative piece in the house. They only have the Suzanis, and then they have nothing else. And we were so lucky, Mia Maria. We went at a time when the Soviet influences and eras is receding, but then people were so poor, and we were really struggling to get hand on $1, and they were ready to sell. And we started collecting them obsessively, came back to Lebanon, added other embroideries. They were eye-openers, but that was matched by embroideries from Syria, from Aleppo and Damascus, Egypt. Maria would go to Tunis, get back things with her. I'd go to Yemen, I'd get things with me. So we started building an archive of embroideries, but still we didn't engage personally in it until the time of 2011, when the region was a turmoil, and people were leaving to come to Beirut, and many embroiderers came with their machines looking for work. they found Bokja, and it was a very safe place for them to be. And that's when we actively looked at their traditional embroideries. We sort of loved what they did. However, we wanted to disrupt what they gave us. The tradition that they offered, we disrupted, we made a dialogue, and we created with their embroideries and with our assemblages of the ones that we collected, we created a very complex layering, and it became a language for us that helped spread the things that we wanted to talk about. I'm telling it all the time because I was last week in an exhibition. The woman who did this exhibition was talking about text being part of textile, referring to weave and telling stories. And for me, it has the same etymological basis in language. And for me, it was stunning because with the thread, you have a word. Each thread, you have a word. And can you imagine how many stories we have in this place?
There is a lot of storytelling here. I'm just wondering if you might just explain what your creation process is. Do you start with the embroidery? Do you start with the piece of furniture? How does it work?
We start with what the story that we want to share. It starts like we sit together with our team because Bokja is a collective. So we have this amazing team of young designers, of these artisans, we are very lucky to be within, this community of like-minded people. So we sit and we decide, okay, whether it is, let's talk about the weather, and would be a way, an introduction to talk about what makes you angry in the world and devise visuals that support the idea, or whether it is monkey business, where we want to talk about Socotra in Yemen, this island which has endemic trees and it has a coral reef that's being endangered, and how we want to shed light on these places and countries in suffering. Or about something personal, like, Reality Fantasy is a Must, is a collection that we did when we felt we needed to dream, or August 4, when the blast happened in Beirut. So all these subject matter, we just talked about, we decided, let's talk about them. And then we have a big canvas where we start jotting down all these ideas embroidered. So we have the visuals, and this canvas becomes a place where we extrapolate those visuals, apply them on furniture, apply them on cushions, apply them on other tapestries, and doing the printing and the embroidery that will go on the wearables.
How has Lebanon's cultural and social landscape influenced your designs?
In the good, the bad, and the ugly. But we don't want to be anywhere else in the world. Definitely, it gives you a lot to talk about. So we don't need to rack our brains and see what's trending. It's really something where we are thinking from within the box, inside the box. This is a box where we were fated to be born into, and we also are privileged to be born into. Because Lebanon gives you one thing and its opposite all the time. And it also has all these layers of civilization and all these contrasting elements. So it is very prominent in our assemblage because we tie them together later on with more embroidery onto them. We put fabrics from all over because we have this mesh in the culture. We have this. We work in terrible conditions at times. We just had a very brutal war. And the building where our atelier is housed was affected, and many people lost their lives. Not from our team, but in the building, so our neighbors. And so it's tough because you come back and you say, let's make pretty things, but we've witnessed ugly. But then we learn that we can heal our souls by creating beauty and talking about what happened, but in our own way, without imposing it on others, because we sell all over the world, and some people are not interested in what happened to us, and it's legitimate. So in our own way, we tell the story. If you want to hear it, you can. Otherwise, you just enjoy the beauty of the mimosa and enjoy the beauty also of the fact that this craft it has been preserved and is expanding through, this collective.
Can you tell me what in particular you are doing to facilitate further expansion for your brand?
Actually, everything we do organically. We don't force anything. Actually, we don't even have time to plan, and that's a major drawback, I feel. It's always something motivates us, something excites us, and we go for it. And being in Lebanon, living and working out of Lebanon, really didn't give us a chance to breathe. It was always one tectonic event after the other. It's been a roller coaster of things, and we haven't stopped. We sought to participate in certain international shows, like Rossana Orlandi happened very organically. We were there, and then we loved the store, and she invited us to participate. Of course, it was very useful to show our products. We showed at Mint Gallery, at Liberty. We sold in New York, at ABC Carpet and Home, and that was all in before we initiated this wearable story. The wearable story is an easier sell, and they communicated our message to the world. And we sell them wholesale. They go to Italy mostly, France, in China, you have in Japan. But we've been lucky with communicating our story, because we did in 2011 a beautiful diptych about the Arab Spring, Arab Fall, and it was acquired by the Institut du Monde Arabe. It's a visual beauty, actually, the two pieces, but they tell the story of the Arab world as it is, in our textiles, in our language, and the story of how we would like it to be. And you see, so we've been here and there. We are in a museum in Bahrain. We are in a museum in Amsterdam with the migration story, a sofa with the pillows on the back and a drawer to house the possessions. It's part of a design Eindhoven. And now we partnered with Sylvia and Pauline. And they've been, it's for the first time that we professionally actually have actively partnered with the PR.
Can I ask you one last question? What sort of advice would you give to a young person wanting to work in design, a designer? What should they do?
We don't want to sound pretentious, because giving advice is something that we still need advice every day. But something that we've experienced after 25 years, and I can advocate that it works, be authentic. To be authentic, to, and to just try. I think people are no fools, and I love that. If they feel the sincerity behind the item, if they feel like there is something personal and it is aligned with the person creative personality in general, they'll be sensitive to it, and it's very important. And also be careful and mindful as much as possible with the way you treat the things of the earth, because we need to be thinking that actually more and more.
I would add something to that. I would add hard work, because I always tell all my I have a lot of younger designers around me, and I always tell them talent is so overrated. It's the passion that's the driving force, but then if you keep this passion and don't do anything with it, nothing happens. So you put your foot in the door, you go and spend hours. And me and Maria, we it wasn't an intentional moment to say, it was just hours. We dedicated hours to what we do, while being honest, while being mindful. We gave in a lot of hours, and it was pleasure at the end of the day.
Yeah, to enjoy what you do is so important. It was something that made me also a better mother to my children, in the sense, like, with their choices of career, I became more fearless than I would have been if I hadn't been so blessed to work in a field that is not just work. It's not my work. It's a way of being. We don't go to work. We go to be.
And I'd like to stress here, moving forward, the importance of, especially where we come from, the importance of creative work. Creative work helps redefine things. If we all agree that it's an honest work that we're talking about, it helps record stories for future generations. So basically what we feel we do here, we write notes on culture and we keep it for the future. And it's so important to do that.
Huda Baroudi and Maria Hibri, founders of Bokja, speaking with Confect's Brenda Tui a little earlier. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Confect Corner. My thanks to Marcella Palick in Zurich and to Gillian Tobias for joining me here in London. Confect Corner is produced and edited by Carlotta Ribello and Steph Chungu. Remember to pick up the latest copy of Confect magazine, which is in all good newsstands now. Until next time, from me, Sophie Grove, goodbye and thanks for listening.